Hi, my name is Elizabeth Keggi. I live in Appleton, Wisconsin. I currently work at Dyslexia Reading Connection here in Appleton. We tutor dyslexic teens, kids, and adults, and I both tutor students and I train the other tutors. I wrote my first short story when I was 8. It was a school assignment, and I really enjoyed that. And then I wrote 2 more stories for myself. And then in the 4th grade, our teacher required us all to keep a journal. And she would collect the journals once a week and then read them and then bring them back to us. She never corrected you for spelling or grammar or anything like that. She just wanted you to be writing. At the same time, I had started reading some poetry, and I just thought, hey, I'm going to write a poem. So I started writing poems for that journal, and she got very excited about my poems. She really encouraged them. And in fact, my first time being published was in the teacher's journal. She submitted one of my poems to be printed in the state teacher's journal in New York State. And that was like catnip, you know?
Yeah. No kidding.
That was catnip. So,
do you remember what that poem was about?
The poem is called A Mouse at Sunset. And it was about a mouse giving thanks at the end of the day. Then we moved from Ithaca, New York to Appleton, Wisconsin. And my 5th grade teacher got a poem published in the Wisconsin State Teacher's Journal. But I don't remember which poem that was. But they did something really cool. They figured out that I loved writing poetry, and they decided to make me the poet laureate of Richmond Elementary School. So whenever there was a big gathering of some kind, I had to write a poem. So I wrote a poem for Columbus Day and for Halloween and, you know, Valentine's and Christmas. So I was always on order to write poems for these special gatherings at school.
That's awesome.
It was really
awesome. That's a great idea.
That was really awesome. I do not have any books out there. I have with me my chapbook, which is not published yet. I took a chapbook class from Carla Houston this past fall, and in helping you to pull together a chapbook manuscript. 2 members of our class have already found publishers for their books, so I'm pretty excited about what my chances might be. Yeah. I'm very anxious about the whole process. Very anxious.
Understandably.
But it's time. It's time I did it. So. When I was 6 years old, my grandmother gave me the book Now We Are 6 by A.A. Milne. And that is all of his poetry. So I was reading that poetry from an early age, and I loved some of the poems so much that I memorized them. So that got me a feeling for what good poetry feels like, not just what it sounds like. When I was in the 4th grade, my parents gave me these old paperbacks. One was great English poetry and the other one was great American poetry. I read those over and over and over again. And my very favorite poems, I would actually copy them out by hand. And that was something that I did for many, many, many years. If I really liked a poem, I would write it out by hand. And that would really give me a sense of what makes a poem work, you know, what the rhythm and all that kind of stuff. And then in the 4th grade, at my school, you got to pick out books once a month. Yeah. And from Scholastic, I think it was. And I got my first poetry book that I bought myself, was a Scholastic book, and it was called The Arrow Book of Poetry. And that had E.E. Cummings in it, and anything that was friendly toward elementary or middle school age students. So
very cool. I
got influenced when I was at Smith College for a year. I took a poetry writing class while I was there, and it was a form writing poetry class. So we were learning how to write tantoons and sonnets and sestinas and, you know, all these different kinds of forms. We had 3 textbooks, and one of them was simply the selected works of Elizabeth Bishop. And that was very influential. That was a long time ago, but that was very influential to me. And she wrote form poetry. And so I found that I really enjoyed doing form poetry, and I still do. because in a way it's like a puzzle. You're trying to put the pieces together in the way that they're supposed to fit according to the form. And it's just sort of like having your canvas on the wall and it's stretched and it's hanging and it's ready to be painted. I don't know. It's sort of how I think of it. It's interesting, my father says it isn't a poem if you can't sing it. So, now he's not a fan of prose poetry.
Okay.
You know? And when I grew up, I was reading the kind of poems that you could sing, you know, with the meter and the rhyme and all that kind of stuff. And of course, the lines are very nebulous, though, between fiction and poetry. And I don't know what to say, what would be the difference. But there is definitely a difference whether you have it in stanzas as opposed to just running line after line after line, filling a page. The shape on the page in some ways can make it a poem. For me, poetry is several things. One is it's just a way of getting what you're feeling and thinking and obsessing about and getting it out of you. You know, it's therapeutic in that sense. It's communication. So I could take something that I'm experiencing and it feels very personal and everything, and I get it out on paper and I share it with somebody else, and now I've communicated what's inside of me to somebody else. But it's also, it can be escapism, because I often write with not my own voice. The character that's speaking the poem is not me, and that's fun. That's kind of like being an actor. And then finally, it just is a real satisfying art. It's very satisfying to take the rough work and start shaping it and turning it into something that really is special. Well, I'm hoping that if I will get this chapbook published, that will help me sort of set aside that anxiety and then really get going on new poems. I'm always writing something new, but really I enjoy working on poems that have been written. I like editing, and I like fussing with it. And I think that getting this chapbook out of the way will just be, it'll be a relief. It'll free up my mental energy. So yes, I would like to keep going. I'm also very interested in, because of my experience as a kid, such a positive experience with poetry and writing, I really want to get involved in working with kids. And I know that the Wisconsin Fellowship of Poetry has some work in that area, and I would like to get hooked up with that. Well, for me personally, I would just love to see more kids getting opportunities to do creative writing of whatever kind, poetry, fiction, nonfiction. I remember going to the Neenah Public Library a few years ago, and they have a back room that they use for classes or recitals and things like that. And that particular time I walked in the door, on my left, the whole wall was covered with writing by students, poems mostly. And they were extraordinary. I mean, young kids can be some of the most extraordinary poets. And this was just dozens of kids' poems on that wall, and they were all wonderful. And I just thought that's a gift you can give to a kid, is help them put what's inside them out on paper. The first poem is called The Leaves. August fullness of green and cicada songs in the tree give way, leaf by leaf, to a colder sun. The tips of the maples chatter with their dry congregation, looking down, down on me. There are no reds or blazing orange leaves celebrating, then falling at my feet like scraps of poster paint. It's all gone gray. Gray chatter, gray condemnation, gray evidence at every step. As I shuffle through the autumn fallout, the trees are raining ashes, and my stride slows until I'm mumbling to myself. eyes fixed on the ground. Ground as gray as winter skies. The evidence sticking to my shoes. I'm going to read a poem that reflects the fact that I read a lot of Edward Gorey books as a child. This one is called Spiders. Spiders hide themselves in silent spots, deep within the closet, beneath the bed, between the window and the screen. Spiders know when you're asleep. They are drawn from their nests by the sweet sound of a little boy's gentle breath. They're in the light fixture above your head. They guard the bathroom, waiting for that midnight visit made on your soft, bare feet in the dark. Good little boys have rooms free of spiders and midnight venom. Were you a good little boy today? I think not. So this poem is called Slow Motion, and the epitaph is, "It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine," by R.E.M. 1. As your car sails toward the wayward semi, no chance of stopping in time, I consider whether death might be like this, a soft sinking into one's seat, a relaxation of muscles clenched for years, thinking about the person next to you and how good it was to have known them, if only for a little while. 2. We inch closer, just a couple of car lengths now, and you're pulling hard to the right. All things considered, life's been good. Childhood abuses fall behind. Confusion, headaches, hallucinations, all released with a deep sigh. All is forgiven, no more regrets. One long last look at you, and then I close my eyes. 3. I long to kiss you again, once the shards of glass and metal have been extracted, and the last clumps of sod thrown down. We'll walk hand in hand beyond the roadside crosses, into the grassy field beyond the ditch, and no one can stop us. You will crown me with wildflowers. No burdens to separate us, because I'll have been liberated at last. Shall we walk on? Hi, I'm Elizabeth Keggi from Appleton. Happy Poetry Month, and read a poem every day. It doesn't hurt.